Let's go ahead and get started. So, welcome everybody. My name is Will. I'm gonna go ahead and start sharing my screen, get things going. Feel free to, like I said, drop things in chat if you have any questions, and we will go from there. I'm gonna share the whole screen. For any of you who's been in any of my sessions before, you'll see I'm once again using our deck builder to create these decks. These are all just HTML pages, but if you're ever curious on how to build any of these, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to share that one as well. It's a slightly different focus than what this one is, but today we're going to be talking about building your own interview prep kit. And we're going to be using Claude to do that. You can use other tools for this. So some of the specifics might need to be a little bit altered, but this is really about thinking through how do you use AI to help you get ready for an interview. And the idea is not to just get ready in general for interview. It's how do you get ready for a specific interview? And that's what we're going to go into. And that's what I've built some of the skill that I'm going to give to you. I'm going to make it available for you all to download and install if you want to run. And then also walk you through what's in it so you can make it your own. Me, real quick. My name is Will. I've been in product management for over 20 years, and I've done that in a lot of different shapes and sizes. I've worked at bigger companies, maybe most notably Indeed, where I really fell in love with helping people get jobs and being involved in their job space. So I've done that for over a decade. Worked at Bazaarvoice, which is a company that everyone's used and nobody's heard of because you've all read ratings and reviews on places like Walmart or Target, and all of that happens with Bazaarvoice. But I've also been in a couple of venture-backed startups. I've been in 4 different lifestyle companies at various stages of my life. And I've been doing coaching and training and workshops for the last 2.5 years. Just recently finished up a Claude code for PMs, and we'll be starting another one in about a month. But and I do these lightning lessons. And my plan is to be offering lightning lessons every week for the month of May. So follow along. I'll email you out when the new ones come out. I'm hoping to have another one scheduled for Friday on like AI memory so that you can keep all of your notes and thoughts from one system to the next and how to organize it, just to help people who might be struggling on figuring out how to do that. So that's me in a nutshell. I'm going to copy this over into chat for anybody who wants to dig in. This is a Google shared folder. You should all have access. If you have anybody has any issues getting access to this, please let me know. But there's a number of things in there. You don't have to go there now. I just want you to have it. So open it up, bookmark it. You'll have the skill, which is a zip file. You'll actually have some examples of dashboards and data that you could download if you wanted to look at on your own. There's even a participation guide that you can look through and do either alongside this or on your own if you decide that you want to dig into it more formally. You're welcome to do that. And those will be available forever. I don't take them away. So if you ever need them, feel free to reach out. Okay, let's jump into the topic. Today, what we're going to be looking at is not just prepping for all interviews, though, yes, you should do that. People miss the opportunity to prep for specific interviews. So if you've been doing any interview prep, you might be prepping for behavioral type interviews where they ask you, how do you do something, or when have you done something? Or if it's more technical, maybe you've done different types of system interviews or sales type pitches or whatever. But the reality is that there's a lot that happens with the person that you're interviewing. And research shows that in the first 5 minutes with that interviewer, they've made an impression, or you've made an impression with them, and they've decided, and then they spend the rest of the interview trying to look for justification for how those first 5 to 10 minutes went. So my take is that if that's the case, let's use as many of the tools as possible to understand how they see the world before you even get there, so that you can make a wonderful first impression, and then they can spend the next hour trying to convince themselves about how awesome they are and how great they are at reading, finding great talent. Let's see. I can put the link in here again. There you go. Great. Hopefully everyone can get that. If you don't, please let me know. I will share it again at the end, and I will email it out afterwards as well. If you ever miss anything, it should be in an email. But yeah, so that's the reality. That's the reality of the psychology of interviews, is that you have a moment to make an impression, and the more that you can kind of pre-know about this person, the better you can do. So let's talk about what that looks like. And how this tool works. So I'm going to not walk you just through sort of the mechanics, though I will walk through that. I want to see where we're going to get to. So Claude skill that I put together that I'll give you to download, it's going to produce a number of things. So this is an example of what it's going to produce. You can see all sort of the titles. I ran this against my profile and an actual job this weekend, and I took a potential person who might be the interviewer and ran it for that. And it gives you a bunch of details. It does company profiles and research elements. It's going to give you some version of your unique edge for the role of like, why do you stand out for it based on the profile that you gave it about yourself. It's going to find some strengths that you can match to what they're looking for in the role. And it's going to provide some coaching notes on how you frame it. It's also going to help identify gaps that you might have that the interviewers might be looking for. And then the most important part, I think, is that it's going to look at the interviewer itself and do some work on predicting the type of questions. And this might feel a little strange. How in the world does it know what they're going to ask? And I started this as a hypothesis that I think it was very doable, that people are a lot more predictable than they think. And then I've been running this now for a number of months, and I've given it to people that are going for interviews. I've met with them, gone over a strategy for their interviews. I've told them what some of the prep questions should be, and then I've followed up with afterwards. Now, this is not a huge statistically significant study, but anecdotally, they all come back and say, Will, these questions were so spot on. And by prepping, I felt like I was so ready for it. And the reality is it's just psychology. And I'm not a psychologist. So this is my amateur version of understanding this. But humans tend to talk about the things the way that they see the world. And so when you look at someone's LinkedIn profile and they talk about their work, they talk about it in the way that they also want to receive information. So if you use that information, you can then talk to them the way they like to be talked to. You can give them the things that they want. And when people get what they want, they feel happy. They feel good. This is going well. So that's a great way to make a good first impression and to have the interviews go well. So it's going to create a document like this. It'll be in Markdown format. You can load that into Google Docs or whatever app that you like to make it actually present nicer. Like if you wanted to see, this is actually in the shared folder. So you're welcome. Some of you have been opening it up. You can look at this. This is the level of detail. This is a real one that was run. I'm not interviewing for this job. This is a real person who works at Lyra Health. And so you can go through and see all of that, but it's pretty thorough in what it goes through. And then it also creates something else. So in this world of AI, let me answer the question. Do you need a paid version? You do not have to have a paid version to use a skill. I will warn you though, that this skill is pretty extensive. It does a lot of work, and I've made some changes to try to make it work cheaper and work a little bit less. So you don't have to build out the HTML dashboard, which is I'm about to show you. If you're on the free plan and you build out the entire report and the dashboard, it will likely use most of your free allotment during that time period. So just warnings with that. If you're on the paid plan, even the $20, you should have a fair amount of space. But if you don't need the HTML version, that's fine. That'll save you a ton of tokens. So I did put a stop in there where you can say, no, don't give this to me. But to me, the dashboard's really interesting because I'm tired of looking at Markdown documents all day because I do that a lot and I want to see something more engaging. And so this gives me an interface that I can actually interact with. So this is the candidate. I can see a bunch of the different questions that I should ask. I can see the gaps, the fixes, and the coaching notes. I can see questions based in different areas based on the role, and then my prep priority and a schedule. And as you complete the schedule, it'll actually save that. Even if you go away and open it back up or refresh it, it'll save it because it's a local store. This is just an HTML page. It just loads on your local computer. You don't need a server for it or anything like that. It'll just produce it and you can load it up in a browser that you'd like. I'm a big fan of those. Claude does a nice job with those pages. So that's what we're going to get to.
Question. Sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
So what are the inputs to generate this HTML? So one is your resume, one is the job description, one is LinkedIn profile, whoever is going to interview, if you know beforehand.
Yep. And if you can go further, you can even provide if you have written up versions of what your typical stories are for your interview questions, you can
Oh,
provide
okay.
those as well, and it will try to identify gaps and match those as well.
Okay. If you have
So,
like two, three solid stories that we built,
mhm.
like a two-pager for a Word document, and we put that. So
Yep.
the four major input documents is what meaning four input documents to generate a solid HTML for us to go through.
So you need two at a minimum, and you need the job posting and your profile.
Okay.
If you're in Claude and you're using a project and you've already loaded your profile, then you just need the job description. If you want it to
Mm-hmm.
personalize to the interviewer, you need the interviewer's profile or some version or information you have about them.
Mm-hmm.
You could also go, sometimes recruiters will send you an email and they'll tell you who you're going to interview with,
Of course.
or what their role is.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay. It's not going to get you a great deal about like how they approach things, but
Mm-hmm.
their role can be helpful. And then if you can go and find details on them, that's incredibly helpful when you do that.
Okay, so you're going to show where to insert those
Yeah,
information,
I'm
right?
gonna I'm
Okay.
gonna run one through and I'm gonna show you where it goes.
Okay, got it.
But I want
Yeah.
you to know what's in there so that you can also make it your own. So
Yeah, but it looks beautiful actually. Like
yeah,
it
yeah,
looks
they
very pleasing to the eye, not the MD file. I know.
right. I love the HTML one as well.
Yep.
It's much more enjoyable to work on that. But I do want to be clear. This is not just it's not just a prompt. There's more to it
Mm.
than that, and you're welcome to explore too. You can also make it your own, but there is a prompt that will orchestrate the flow. It'll tell you what you need to put in there. It'll give you some options. It'll work with different models. If you're on a paid plan, I have it prompted to use various prompts to try to be mindful of your tokens. So it'll do a lot with Sonnet. It'll do some of the work with Haiku if you give it like a PDF, and then it'll ask Opus to review and make sure everything's good. So it only uses that for about 5%. So it's much cheaper on your profile or on your token use. It also has a number of reference files. I started this with a couple of areas, and then I also added a coaching voice as well. And I'll walk you through a little bit of that. But the profile side, this is the part I want you all to think about, is that interviewing has a lot more to do with psychology than a lot of us think about, because it's really about people deciding. The bigger companies, they do have more structure to it, and when that happens, it has a lot less to do with a person who's interviewing and their own biases. However, there's a lot of people that are interviewing at non really large companies or very structured interview processes, and in that case it's over 39-40% of the interviewers are going by just their sort of gut feel or their own unintended biases. If you go to the same school or the background, or you actually, it can be really bad if you went to a school that was a competing school of their university and they see that, then it stinks that that's the truth, but it is. That's what all of the research has shown in that area, which kind of is unfortunate. But now you need to figure out how you use these tools to help you. So here, this is built in already. It's got things around career path predicted question styles based on the interviewer's background. What type of questions are they likely to ask? For example, I did this with like an executive suite, a COO and a CEO. Go figure, they are interested in very different things. If you go with monumental high risk activities to a COO, they freak out. You do that with a CEO, they get excited. You go to operational and cost cutting in a COO, they're thrilled. You do that to a CEO and they're bored out of their mind and not interested. So you just need to understand your audience. And it's true at every level, by the way, whether it's your peer or the skip level or multi skip levels. This is the way it works. They have a particular way that they want to be communicated with. So it's also some element of their this stage of the business as well, and it's going to talk about that as well. So this has built some of that in. So there's elements of what's the stage of the company, what's the altitude of the questioning that's going to happen based on who you're interviewing with. Skip level managers tend to think about things very differently than your direct manager or your peers. So it's all built in there as it's not just a first draft. It's not just I've done it once. I've run this with a bunch of people and improved it over time, but it doesn't mean that it's specifically made for you. So it should get close and then you could refine it. So the other thing I've added in here is a coaching
It's
voice.
4:45.
And in the coaching voice, what I mean by that is we've all experienced how AI will tell everything is good all the time unless you tell it something otherwise. Well, I do a lot of coaching, so I've captured a lot of transcripts of how I coach and asked Claude to capture a lot of my coaching voice. I didn't give you my full coaching voice because I don't think any of you, unless you've worked with me, should have to put up with my coaching. I think you'd like it, hopefully, but there's some elements that I wanted it to come out in the voice. Things like I believe that you should be good, not nice, which means I'll tell you hard truths that you need to hear to help you succeed. Um, but I'm not just going to tell you that things are good, like just to for the sake of building you up. But I also am not going to leave you with this beat up mentality because mindset is a really big part of success in anything that we do. And you should know that there is a path from where you are to where you need to get to. And so what you'll see in this document is that it will tell you that there's a gap, and then it'll tell you what you need to do to take steps to fix it and how you should position things. And that's very much of how I approach things as well. So I've tried to embed some of that in some of my personality. If you don't like it, you won't hurt my feelings if you choose to download the skill and change the voice to something different. If you give it suggestions to improve how it would work for you, I just want you to succeed. So do whatever you need there. But you will find that there is some voice that's a little bit different than your typical Claude or ChatGPT out of the box for sure. Back to Shruti's questions of what is the input. The more that you give it, the better it's going to be able to give an answer and feedback. So I ran this with someone as an example, and they gave me a job description, and then they said, "Well, all of these things are a little bit off because it's for a different job." I'm like, "Well, then you've got to give me a different job description if you want it to improve. Like I can't have the skill magically know what you're going for." So the more details you give it, the better your resume, your stories, the LinkedIn profiles of the people you're going with, the better it's going to do. That's just the state of things. This is where context comes in. Just understand that the more that you give it, the more time and or tokens it will take. So if you're sensitive about that, if you take things out of PDFs and put them into text files, that's great. If you if they're image heavy and you just get the text elements, that's better than it having to process all of these images. So that those things will help you as well. Okay, what's actually in here? So you're going to see when you get this report.
Sorry,
Uh,
Will, on
yeah,
the
no, go ahead.
previous one, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, of
In,
course.
in terms of LinkedIn profile, for example,
Mm.
does the skill take in URL or would you need a PDF format?
No, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. I'd actually opened this up for this exact reason. You should go and grab one. I'm just going to grab, I don't know who Stan is. Um, Stan is here. And what you should do is just hit the three dots and hit save to PDF. And then what that'll do is it'll open it up like this. And this is a really easy way for it to grab a bunch of this text. If you really want to be sensitive in terms of tokens, you could just copy and paste the text. So like highlight all and then copy. And then you could paste that directly into the skill as one of the text inputs.
Got it. Is it fair to assume that in most cases you don't want to provide URLs, rather download in some other form and provide that as a context?
I find that that's more reliable because one of the things that I find with AI tools is it will try to go out and get them, but it doesn't always tell you when it fails and that it just made up additional stuff or tried to do the best it could with the little bit that it could glean. There are more and more sites that now have blocking techniques for AI tools, so it won't allow them to fully browse. If you're on a paid plan, there's a decent chance that your tools will start spinning up things like an instance of Puppeteer or Playwright, and it'll try to be grabbing screenshots of those things, which are just going to use a ton of tokens when you're doing that. And that I would just rather you not waste it on that. I'd rather you get more depth in terms of your content. So the more you can control the context, the better your output's going to be. And then LinkedIn almost always shuts down any access to a profile from any automated system. So I don't recommend just dropping the LinkedIn profile. Most of them are not going to be publicly visible.
Got it.
Um,
Thank you.
same thing with job postings. If they're on LinkedIn or Indeed, a lot of times they won't be grabbable. Some smaller or mid-sized companies, they probably don't have a blocker, so you could just give the URL and it would likely go get it. But if you just highlight the text that you want, then that'll focus the feedback on just the most important parts.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. Yeah. Um, any other questions while we're going? I know it looks like somebody else posted the document again, so I appreciate that. In case anyone needs it again. Nope, that's not the right one. I'll post the shared document again in case anyone needs it.
I'll do it. Will, don't get
Okay.
distracted. I'm
No, I
here.
appreciate it.
I'll take
Yep,
care of
thanks.
that. Sure.
Okay. So when you get the report, when you get this report, the things that I would encourage you to do is to start with the gaps with the fixes first. Look there to start getting an idea of some of the things that you should be doing between now and when this interview happens. So if your interview is today, tomorrow, you don't have a ton of time. So look at the biggest gaps that could have the biggest impact and focus on that. Focus on having a way to address this concern This is likely, the way that I read these is this is what's likely in the interviewer's head before you even connect. Is they've decided they want you in here, but they feel like this gap is likely what's could be the reason for them to say no. Is that can you actually justify that you should be here based on this missing element? So figure out how you're going to address it. Practice that. Get that figured out. Then, if you wanted to move into the coach's notes, those are ways that you can frame your work and your story, the things that are really strong but might just need the proper framing to work for this role. Then we get into like the questions that you want to practice, but please, please practice out loud. This is really important. We think a lot in our head and we think we're organizing our thoughts, but that doesn't always translate to what we're going to say out loud. And I'd rather you stumble over those in the mirror, in the shower, walking around the neighborhood, driving in the car, than in the interview. So get those stumbles out when it doesn't matter yet and figure out how to rephrase it. When we write, we tend to write complicated stories. When we have AI write for us, it writes in complex stories with M dashes everywhere. And then when you try to say it, and that's just not how we talk. So practice it out loud and figure out what's going to make it easy for you to deliver. So, and then remember that you also want to think about this per interviewer. So if you're going to be on a panel or you're going to go through 3 or 4 different people, you can run multiple profiles in this and it'll tell you what to expect from different people. You can do that. I don't know what the limit is. I haven't tried more than 2. I think I put 2 in. I don't think I put 3 or 4 in. If you're going to have a bunch of different interviews, you might want to run it slightly differently, but you could definitely add a few different ones for sure. And then this is still work to be done. This can't do the interview for you. This is not some secret tool that will tell you the answers while listening to it. I know that there are some interview practice tools out there that aren't really practice. They just throw it up on the screen and you do the best you can to pretend like you really know what you're talking about. This is not that. This is for you to be able to bring your best self to the interview and to really have an understanding of what they're looking for. So that's what I'd love for you to do. I'm going to steal from James Clear, but I'm going to give him credit because I think it's a great quote from his Atomic Habits books is we do not rise to the level of our goals, but we fall to the level of our systems. This is the system I'd love for you to have is for you to practice out loud each day. Find something that you do most days and have that be the trigger for practicing, whether it's an answer to your tell me about yourself or to take one of these practice questions that come up in this kit or that you ask Claude or ChatGPT or whichever tool you like, give me a practice question to practice on my drive to the grocery store, to the gas station, to whatever, and then use that time. And I tell people often in my coaching practice to also practice away from your notes and screens. Because if you always have your notes, even when you don't need them, you're going to do this. You're going to do this all the time and you're going to disconnect from the people. So get away from the screens and allow it to become more conversational. And then just keep working on it and you're going to get there. Okay. Couple of quick notes here. You can make these things yourself, your own. I'm going to show you where this looks like in Claude in just a second, but you can make adjustments to reference files. I've added, I'm actually going to go ahead and show you what it looks like on the inside. This is actually one I was running, but in the skill itself, I've already created a whole bunch of different role specifics to try to cover as many as possible. So there are some details like interview references for AI ML type roles, career transition individuals, data analytics, design, engineering, management, marketing, ops, product, and program. But you can add more in here. If there's a particular role that I didn't cover, it will still handle it if you don't have these. It will still do its best. This was just a specific research I did across a bunch of these different areas to try to give better questions and answers. But you can add to those on your own. And so that's how you can make these changes. You can add additional resources for this. And so I would encourage you to do that. You can also look if you have experience with going through interview prep, you can make these changes. But I want to tell you that out of the box, this will work pretty well. So don't feel like you have to, but also don't feel like you shouldn't. Yeah, so I want to show you, let's see, I think I just did it in a recent one here. Well, let me do 2 things. First, let me show you how you install it. And then second, let me show you an example of one. So the way you install it if you're using the desktop app or if you're in the web browser and you're using Claude, you can be in chat or cowork. Either one is fine. You can just go to customize. You'll click on skills. My skill is already there, but you'll just hit the plus sign and do create skill and then go over to upload a skill. And it'll pop up this window. And the folder that I shared with you all, this is the folder. You're going to need this interview prep kit.zip file. So if you go to it on Google Drive, it'll look like this. You don't need to, I mean, you can browse through it. It's fine. So you know what's in there, but this isn't what you need. You need to download this. So you can click on the download button right here. I think or you can go over here and you can go to download. You just need to download the zip folder. You don't need to unzip it on your computer. You're just going to load it up into Claude. Okay. So then you just drag it into here and it will load all of these files for you in this zip folder and it'll be added to your Claude account. If there's anybody who's into Claude Code, feel free to reach out to me later. I don't think I've made the GitHub repo public yet, but I will happily do that. I'm happy to have you pull it down and you can install it in your Claude Code instance. Or you can just do this and make your own edits. You can do this on Claude Code as well. Okay, that's as hard as it is to install. You drag and drop and then you're ready to go. And then this is the flow that I did earlier so that you could see what it looks like without me having to take 10 minutes while it runs. So when I typed it in, so all you have to do now that it's installed is you type interview prep kit, and then you can hit enter and it'll start walking you through the prompt. So this is the output that it gave me right here. Thanks, Emily. I appreciate it. It'll tell you what's required. So Shruti, you were asking what's required. The job posting and your background, those are the minimum. The best is when you also give it the interviewer's profile as well. Add those, and if you also want to add your stories, absolutely add your stories. So what I mean by stories, for those of you that have coached with me, we talk about stories as our interview prep stories. These are our success stories that we've pre-written, that we've practiced, that we've gotten really well structured. If you've written them out, add them to this, and it will help identify where your gaps in some of your stories and how to position those. It'll have more information about you at that point. And then you run it. So, and what I did here was I dropped in the PDF of my LinkedIn profile. I grabbed Mogon's profile, which is someone who works at the company. And then I grabbed the job posting and I just copy and pasted it into a text file so that I could easily serve it up here for you all. You don't have to put it into a document. You could just copy and paste it into the prompt. It's totally fine, but that just made it easy to deliver. And then you hit enter and you let it run. And it's going to do a lot of different things. So it's going to create. So these are actually, I ran this right as we were connecting today. So this is going to be slightly different than what's in the folder probably because LLMs will do that. They're going to change things, but it's going to give me all of these details that I could save into a Google Doc and go from there. And then it'll also create the dashboard. And so it should look fairly similar because I have a template that I've created and used, so it doesn't have to create the design every time. It shouldn't be different. It has a template to start from. And so this is, this is how it creates it for you. And if you want them locally, you just click the download and now they're on your computer. And now you have these resources to prep for your upcoming interviews. All right. So that's what we have. What we've gone through is how to do this with one skill. And the thing is, you can do this with your skills for your job search. You can do this for prepping for your stories. You can create skills that will help you, whether it's for interviewing or doing your work.
It's 5 o'clock.
And I just wanted to share with you that this is what I teach. So I'm going to stop and take questions, but I do this in workshop formats on Maven. I would love if anyone is interested, whether they're in product or not. But I'm not going to sit here and talk for half an hour about a pitch. I just want to let you know that I'm here and I'd love to answer questions for you. And I will drop my links for whatever is coming next. And then I will shut up about my upcoming course and answer questions.
Quick question, Will.
Yeah.
So this skill, right? So it doesn't need to be just for product manager. It can be used for anybody in general,
Absolutely. Yeah.
right?
So I did not build this. Like, yes, I have 20 years in product, but I did not build this for product managers. I built
Okay.
this for anybody who is job searching.
Job
So
searching.
if you look at the different roles,
Mm-hmm.
these specific files, let's take a career transition person. So this is someone who might be switching from one path to another.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to try to help you understand why are you switching. These are questions that typically come up, and then
Mm-hmm.
how do you map them from one thing to another. This is where you start to find similarities in the types of work you were doing to the type of work that you want to be doing. Because
Mm-hmm.
frankly, if you make the interviewer think too hard about it, they're going to stop listening to you. So you need to connect the dots for them.
Got
It
it.
actually provides details on how you bridge the narrative, any experience gaps that you might have in terms of the specific skills or that they're looking for. And then these are typical concerns that interviewers come up with when you're switching fields.
Mm-hmm.
So it's got a lot of these for all of these different roles, different
Okay.
particular language structure, whether you're in marketing, sales, operations, program, product. Um, it's there, and then it also has a perspective on how to do this, whether it has the actual specific role or not. So it has a fallback. So even if you're not in one of those, it actually offers that. Um,
Okay. Good.
so yeah.
Are you planning to do a quick small demo or anything like how do we do it? Or
Oh,
did
that's what this is the output of it that I ran.
you just
Uh,
ran? Okay, got it.
I
Okay.
just I can run it again if anybody wants to, but if you want to see, this is literally the output in Claude. You load
Okay.
the skill, you drop these in, and then
Mhm.
it gives you the
Okay,
output.
good.
You don't have
Okay.
to go back and forth. But I can run it again while everyone's seeing what
No, 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 no. We're
um
good. We're good. No, that's all. Yeah, if anybody is planning to or thinking about taking the Maven course from Will, he'll give you information and knowledge more than you really can eat, chew, and absorb. It will take like weeks for you to even, wrap your head around. But once you wrap your head around, you will understand why did he give so much content. So I highly recommend it.
oh
Anybody who's looking for product managers shifting to AI or shifting PMs with AI combination, then Will is the guy.
you are very kind. I appreciate it.
No,
Um
you're yeah. I'll keep quiet now. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, let me answer some of these questions. So one, I'm going to run this. So I just created a new chat, by the way, and I just typed the interview prep kit. Let me walk through this, and then Sean, in just a second, I'll show you how to load this real quick. I want to go ahead and get this running so you all can see it, um, and then it's going to ask me for files, job postings, background. This is what it should be asking for. You can hit the plus sign and add files, or you can just open up. I have a bunch of them already here. So I'm just going to drag in the profile. I'm going to grab my own profile. I'm going to put the job posting. So I just copied it all in there. Um, and now I'm going to just hit send and it's going to start working. And then Sean, let me show you how you do this while this is working. So the way it works is that whether you're in chat or co-work, the first thing you should do is download the skill. So if you're in the shared document, and if you all need the shared document again, here it is. Um, download the interview prep kit.zip file. So you just click to download, it'll download to your local. Um, you don't need to unzip it, so don't worry about what's in it. I mean, you're welcome to click in and see all of the files. Google will let you do that. Um, but once you've downloaded it, then when you're in the app, um, and you hit customize, and then you hit skills. And then in this section right here, you just hit plus, hit create skill, and go over to the upload a skill. And then you drag and drop that zip file here. You do not have to unzip it at all. Just drop it right here. Um, and then it'll load it, and that's it. And then you're done. And then you can use it. Okay. Kivon, go ahead. Ask your question. And then James, I saw your question as well. I'll come back to you.
Yeah, I will.
Hey.
So I can edit this too, right? The skill markdown file if I want to
Yeah.
make changes. Any thoughts on like post interview? Sometimes I record them and I ask like ChatGPT based on my transcript for any improvements. Do you have anything in
Abs
mind for that, or have you done?
Yes, I think that's great. Everyone should be doing that. With the cat, well, let me rephrase. Shouldn't be giving advice on recording people. You all decide whether you're comfortable with. If I were interviewing actively right now, I would be using whatever I can to get a transcript of my interviews so that I can figure out what I did well, what I didn't do well. So what I would do is I would take my transcript. I haven't built a skill specifically for this, but some version of that prompt is you could take this. I would think you could probably take this based on your approach, and afterwards you could give it the transcript and say, here's what I actually said in the interview. How could I have done better in this particular role? Or what are the areas that I did well so I know what's working? And what are the areas I could improve? And with all of the context that Claude would have with this, and its understanding of what to anticipate, I think that it would give you a very rich answer because all of this context is already there on terms of the psychology of interviewing. And then it would see the actual evidence of the interview and be able to really dissect it in a nice way. So I would use this for that or add more to the skill to say, and this is the post interview piece. I love that idea. Um, Keep in touch. Maybe I'll add that as a prompt that you could do after the interview of one of these prep kits, and it could have a process at post. I like that idea. I can put that on my to-do list.
Thank you. And then there's the other zip file in the folder.
What's that?
There's another zip file in that folder, Lyra Health Interview Prep. Is that
Oh
this?
yeah. That's just the dashboard. Because if you put up a .html file, so that's what this is.
Okay.
That's just a version so that you all can see it. A lot of people sign up for these and don't come, and I like them to be able to interact if they wanted to see it on their own afterwards. But yeah, so you can just download this exact file. It's my SVP of product prep that I did as a demo for this. That's all it is.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, for sure. And you can unzip the files and you can edit them all. They're all just markdown files. You can also just ask Claude to help you edit them. If you do things, I recommend that for everyone who has a skill. You can just tell it to make adjustments. Say, hey, I didn't like this output. I didn't like this format. I don't like these colors. I don't like 2 columns, whatever, and have it change it. Yeah, you can definitely change a bunch of those. Like if you look in the templates, that's why the pages will always look like this, because I have a template to get it started so that it would more reliably give you some good output in terms of the structures of things. But yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's see another one of the questions. How effective is this for senior level directors? James, I will tell you that I started all of this because in my coaching practice, I often am working with people that are prepping for executive level roles. So think VP, SVP, C-suite, and board members. And they often have the actual profiles of the people that they're interviewing with. And one of the one-on-ones that I do with a lot of people is, how do you get ready? And one of the things that I started doing was doing a bunch of this work. And those are the ones that the first ones came back where they were just like, oh my goodness, Will, that was the question, the first question I got. That was the second question I got. So I can't say statistically, but I can say anecdotally, I have great evidence that it works wonderfully for even senior level roles. And some of that might be because those interviewers are more known because you tend to get their profiles and you get more history of what their journey is. Their career journey tends to have a big influence on the way that they approach interviewing. So yeah, I think it's pretty valuable there. So hopefully that helps. Does that work? I tested as a gem. I have not tested as a gem. I did load the entire zip file into ChatGPT and asked it if it could run it. It ran it. It wasn't quite as thorough. And I frankly don't find OpenAI's writing as clear. Though maybe with 5.5, I haven't tried it very much with that. But I think gems. I think Gemini has been having ways for you to be able to take Claude skills and have them work. It may, when I tried to load it as a zip file, because there's so many reference files, it didn't like it. And I just didn't take the time to expand all of it. But I'm sure that if you're more familiar with gems than I am and with Gemini, you should be able to do that pretty well. And so, but you could take all these files and extract it and load them into Gemini and ask it to help you build a gem with these ideas. That would be totally fine. So I think you could get there. Can you create this HTML? Yeah, this was all, this is just a template and just have it create it. So then there was a question of on building the skills to capture our success stories or various behavioral situational questions. I have a number of those in my coaching practice that I use. And yeah, so there's a number of skills. Over time, I'll probably do some additional lightning lessons on the career side. I do spend more of my time building tools out for how people go about doing their work using AI tools as opposed to just the job search. This was just an interesting blend between a need for people wanting to prep and using AI tools to get that done. So I chose to share that. And Preeti, the recording for this will be available typically within a day or so. You'll get an email about the recording, and it'll all be available for you along with all the documents. So, any other questions?
Hey, Will, this is me too. In response to my question, I asked the question way too fast. It does help generate the HTML. Thank you.
Yes, it will generate the HTML for you. Yeah, you just have to tell it to, or sometimes it will go all the way through, but ideally it will just create the markdown, and then you can just tell it, go ahead and build the interactive dashboard, and that generates all of the HTML for you.
Seems like
Yep.
it's doing it right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much. This is great. I have an interview tomorrow.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
This was the one that I kicked off earlier, and it's still running for a bit. This is why I said I did one so y'all could see a beginning to end, because it will take a while. And yeah, it's going ahead and creating the HTML now. So,
Sonnet is good enough, right, Will, for this?
what's
Or
that?
haiku?
Sonnet is good enough. Yeah, I actually made the prompt. You get into the prompt itself will actually specifically use Sonnet for most things, haiku for extracting from PDF documents, and then it will use, if you have access to Opus, it will use Opus as an advisor to review the voice and make sure that it's getting the best tips and it's not contradicting each other across subagents. So it uses Opus for about 5% of the run, and it uses Sonnet for most of the rest, and Haiku when it doesn't need like really smarts, it just needs sort of brute force. So trying to be as sensitive to people's token use as possible so you can do more things.
Okay,
Yeah.
so as frugal as we can. So everything is in the skill already written, right?
It's already there. Yeah,
Okay.
I wanted to make this as plug and play for you all as possible so that you could just use it, because I geek out about creating skills and trying to help people get jobs doesn't mean everybody else wants to geek out about it. So I just figured if you just wanted to use it, you could. And it should be in a state that you can use it. So
Thank you.
Kevin, go ahead.
Does this also help with questions like product sense questions, analytics questions that you sometimes get in like bigger companies?
Yep. Yeah, if you get into the skill itself and look into some of the roles. So let's say you get into product management, you'll see behavioral, product design and sense, product strategy, analytics, execution, estimation, and technical questions. If you get into AI ML, you'll get into more system design type questions. If you get into engineering, you'll have coding, technical leadership, architecture, debugging questions.
And how well can you assess the response? Because if you play around with ChatGPT, you're getting so many different answers, and it's hard to really gauge like what is a good response to like should Google enter the senior care industry, and you have to do competitive analysis. How well can you gauge the answer of what it gives you?
How well can I,
Like
or how well
let's say
can the
they build
system, or how well can you? I want to make sure I answer your actual question.
right. Like, did you build this with your assessment in mind? Like, what you would answer as a PM?
I no, I did not give it a ton of rubrics for all of these things. As someone who does coaching on how people go through this process, and I have a degree in computer science, so like I have a lean towards the engineering side, and I've been doing product for a long time. So those areas, I think a lot of my coaching background is fed into some of this. But generally speaking, I think that the specifics that you might be looking for, that's an area that as you dig into this and make it your own, you could give it the things that I think would make this stronger for a specific area is to provide strong answers and really bad answers. So give it those two guardrails of what's great and what's bad. They're already fairly well known, sort of good and bad in terms of these areas. But if you have something more specific that you're really aiming for, then by all means, I suggest that you add it. It would make it much, much stronger. There's some elements in here. The biggest part of this that I think most people and most systems avoid or ignore is the human engagement piece. That's the human psychology piece layer here. If you add that plus some of your specificity of a particular role or your areas of expertise in best practices or great answers, yeah, I think you're going to find that it'll be really good. But what it's not doing, by the way, it's not telling you whether your answer is good or not. Even though
Right.
you could add your stories, it's going to tell you whether there's elements in there that are going to speak at the right level. So that's what it's going to do, but it's not going to assess your stories to say whether or not there's big gaps in your the structure of your story. This isn't a story assessment, it's a prep. There's a whole other set that I would suggest you really need to address in terms of assessing the answers that you'd be giving, which I think is what you're getting at, right? Like if you were to give an answer, how well did your answer the question? Is that am I getting to the right point there?
Yeah, like so I'm like interviewing for IC roles, and a lot of what I do is like mock interviews, like
Hmm.
try exponent or try to find. But it's hard to really understand. Like it's very much based on the level of the person that you're interviewing with, and sometimes they have a prescripted approach of how they answer the questions. If they're like
Yep.
Amazon only style questions, Facebook meta. So I'm curious if like your clients do a mix of both, where they're still doing mocks with
Hmm.
humans, and then also prepping with like an LLM.
Yeah, so my yes, that's a great question. And yes, my answer is yes, both. Um, one of the things that I think that AI does a good job is giving you a opportunity to get lots of repetitions and exposure to questions. That to me, I think is super valuable because the more exposure we get, the more our muscle memory of navigating our stories it gets better, gets stronger as you go through some of that. That part's great. AI is great for that. The feedback I think is good-ish. If you haven't done any practice and I got any feedback, that's better than nothing. You can likely get from, let's say, zero prep to maybe 80, 90%, 80, 85% maybe in terms of being good. And I expect in 6 months to a year that that'll actually get you even further. I believe that's the case. I'm kind of planning for that in terms of my life. Um, and with that being said, I still think that the things that AI does really poorly right now is I think it doesn't do a great job of giving you coaching on the production of your answer. I had this in my slides, but I took it out because I wasn't going to go too far into it. But production, what I mean by production is so many of our interviews are on video, and body language matters, lighting matters, microphones matter, sound matters. That's part of the interactions. And whether this feels conversational or not is something that AI doesn't pick up too well. Most of these tools that give mock interviews, they're not going to tell you you seemed distracted, or they're not going to tell you that you were monotonous in your delivery and you were monotone in the way that you did it, or that you spoke too quickly and that you need to let your ideas breathe so that the interviewer can process and think through these things. Some of the tools are trying to get there, but frankly, other than some of the really expensive tools that I've seen within the HR tech space, um, they're just not doing it justice there. And I think that's where working with a person is helpful. And
Awesome.
then you just need some of the domain expertise, someone who can tell you that, yeah, that's actually a whole bunch of hogwash and you need to try a better
Yeah.
answer. And so,
Yeah.
but knowledge is not really the biggest issue right now. That's not the biggest gap. I think it's the nuance and the human interaction piece that is really important to do with some people. But you don't need as many of those. Those are kind of polishing the end result, but you should definitely do those before you show up for an interview.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Good luck, by the way, in your interviews.
Thank you. Appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Um, Lauren, tell me more if you can. If you're in a place where you can talk, you could probably refine the skill to evaluate against X style Q&A.
Yeah, I was just commenting to one of the questions that was being asked as you've been giving some advice for how people can own the skill and kind of refine it over time, right?
Hmm.
If you want to add in a rubric to help you evaluate. I think in the last example, Kivon, if you wanted to take a Amazon style, a Fang style, a whatever style interview and put that in as a requirement or through the practice, now evaluate me against these. I think what you're getting at, Will, is we have a lot of insights based on AI to predict what type of interview we might have based on a user that we might engage with, but they may be in a different situation that we can't predict. So someone who has a history of working at Amazon style organizations may now be in some new startup phase where they're trying to do things differently, and they may not interview within an Amazon style, right? So there are some things that we can't, context is everything. But if you're
For sure.
going for those roles and that's important to you, and getting the feedback from this skill to show how you may be faring or preparing across these contexts, then we'll want to refine our skill along the way,
Yep.
right?
Absolutely. All of that, and continue to iterate, make this your own. Like I believe, I told people in my course just recently that you can go out and you can find all of these marketplaces of skills and download them. There's a reason I don't publish out like hundreds of skills, because I don't think that's the most interesting part. I think getting a couple that you then iterate on and make your own that are much better and targeted for you. So what Lauren was talking about is, if you take this and you add something that's relevant for you, that's much better than I could ever know, because I was planning this for a whole bunch of people, right? I don't
Mhm.
know. You should add that. You absolutely should. And then you should get feedback from it and tell it when it's wrong. Hey,
That's
this
right.
is not good. I don't like this. This is not the way that it should work on. Or grab a video transcript of someone who's done a mock interview and it was really good. You should copy that transcript and put it in there and say, this is an example of a great interview. And then find one
Mhm.
that's really bad, maybe your own, maybe someone else's. That's an example of what's really bad, and tell me how to do it better. Those things
Mhm.
will make this so much more rich. This, like, there's no ego here. This is just to get you from nothing to something in your journey, and hope that you will then take it to get it a little bit better. And even if you don't iterate on it, it's better than if you didn't do any of this. And I just want you all to go, if you're job searching, I want you to go find something. If you're interviewing people, I want you to think about the people you're interviewing with, that they're bringing a lot of these kind of anxiety as well. And just win in this market. It's a tough market right now. It just is. And so any skill that you can use and any opportunity you can get yourself ahead, I'm all for it.
Yeah. While I have the floor, to share with others, another. I couldn't read through. You may have had it, so will let me know. But
Mhm.
I was trying to search for the STAR method, which seems to be a really popular
Yep.
interview style right now too. So I wasn't.
I don't know that I
Me.
have it in here specifically,
Oh,
but STAR will definitely show up in here.
yeah.
Yeah. For everyone who's not sure, STAR is situation, task, actions, results. A simpler version, if you want to go a little bit simpler, I mean, you can do a search for STAR and a lot of people will tell you about it. PAR, which is problem, actions, results. So it's a set the stage for what problem you're solving. Frankly, people like you to solve problems because that's what they have in their jobs. They have problems and they're hiring someone to solve those problems. That's what the situation and task is. Actions are the actions you took to make the problem go away. And the results are proof that you made the problem actually go away. That's a really good formula to de-risk the decision of someone hiring you. They're trying to make a decision based on a few conversations on whether you can make their business better. Are they going to enjoy working with you? Are you going to solve their problems? Are you going to make the business more money and or deliver whatever value you're expected to deliver? Make that not as risky by showing them evidence that you've done that. That's the epitome of a behavioral interview. What behaviors have you done that prove that you're not a risky hire and that's going to actually solve our problems? They
Yeah.
care a lot less about your features, the functions, or the politics at your previous company. They care about how you're going to navigate things within their company. So,
I think the last tip maybe that
mhm.
everyone should probably be playing with here is the what questions do you have for me?
Mm,
I've been working with a lot of executives who are in the hiring phase or taking advice from hyper growth organizations. You have the interview set up, but what carries the most weight then is how can I tell how this person thinks? And
mm.
usually the types of questions that someone asks are a huge indicator of how people think. So I've been trying to play with, these kinds of skills in helping to shape that, right? Based on the profile of this individual, based on the context of this organization. What are some interesting questions that could help differentiate me in this context or my team member who's looking for, that role or whatever?
Yeah, you're spot on. The questions that you ask are important. Um, one of the things that I suggest to people is to also think about those questions as you can reverse the behavioral interview question on them as well to try to get an idea of what it would be like working with them. So like, hey, the last time that you had a manager who changed her priorities in the middle of the work that you were doing, how did you navigate that and what happened in terms of your team dynamics? Great. Have them answer a behavioral question that they haven't prepped for. So they're probably going to leak a whole bunch of details that they didn't intend to share. And now you have a better idea of what you might be getting into if you get the job. And it's really telling, right? Like it's good for you to figure out what you're about to get into. So, any other questions? I'm going to throw my ad up one last time. Thank you all for being here. I'd love to have you if you're interested in learning more. Please follow along. I will be doing more lightning lessons on lots of things. Some of them will be job search related. Some of them will just be how to use AI to get your job done. If you're in the product program or associated roles around that, love for you to consider coming in for the Claude code work. You will learn a ton. I promise you. You will do some really interesting things. You'll build some fun things, and the command line won't be so scary. I promise. Terminal. I've had people who were saying they were really terrified of terminal, and then 4 weeks later, I had one PM who shipped his first pull request for both front end and back end within 2 months of first time he's ever gotten into the terminal. So super fun. Not that you have to do all those things, but if you're interested, I'd love to have you there. Yeah. And by the way, if y'all are all job seeking or considering it, I don't mind at all if you all dropped your LinkedIn profiles into chat because you would like to connect with other people who are also interested in this process. Loose connections are incredibly powerful. Feel free to grow your network because you have 35 people here. If you would like to make some connections, if you put it out there and people reach out, you don't have to accept it, but maybe make a note. Hey, I was also in the lightning session today. I'd love to expand my network, love to connect with like-minded people who are investing in themselves and in their job search. So drop it in. Maybe you'll find a connection that'll help you make a introduction to someone that you want to talk with. So feel free to use the platform. It is all yours. And I'm happy to answer any other questions if there are any.
Will, is the Cloud Code for PMs the one on Maven?
Yes.
It's called AI for Product Managers. Is that the same one?
Yeah, I changed the name because I didn't like the original one.
Okay.
Yeah, starting in a few weeks. Anybody who signs up in the next, I'm going to be putting this out, but anybody who signs up now, you'll go ahead and get access to the Slack community. I'm planning to have a couple of pre-live sessions where we just kind of get together, answer any questions, help troubleshoot with anybody long before the class starts, because why not? If you want to join early, I'd love for you to engage. We also have a whole previous cohort of people who are always kind of engaging and talking through some of the things that they're coming up with in the Slack community that we have. So anyone who signs up, welcome to have you join. All right. Well, I appreciate y'all being here. I'm going to keep this open in case anyone else wants to drop in or chat anything in LinkedIn for another minute or two. But thank you all for your questions, for your engagement, for your presence. I appreciate you being here. And I hope to see you on some other future session, or reach out if you have any questions. I am happy to help. I give abundantly because I believe that that's great. I think we all should try to find ways that we can help others. So if you need something, reach out. Happy to do what I can. And best of luck in your job search. Hope everybody it goes well and you find the role that you're hoping for. All right. Go forth and be awesome, everyone. I'll talk to y'all later.
Thank you so much, Will. Hey, Craig, how are you?
Thanks, Will. Hey, Smriti.